So now I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker for today's event, Dr. Roger Firestien. Dr. Roger Firestien is committed to making creativity simple, making it practical, and helping people apply their creativity to produce results. He's the senior faculty member at the International Center for Studies in Creativity at the State University of New York, Buffalo State. The center confers the only Master of Science degree in creativity studies of its kind in the world. Roger's the author of over 80 articles, books, audio, and video programs. His research focuses on how to help groups develop creative solutions more productively. Called the gold standard of creativity training by his clients, some of the organizations to benefit from his keynote presentations, training, and facilitation include AT&T, Disney, the Los Angeles Times, Farmers Insurance Group, General Electric, General Mills, Merck, UBS, the American Hospital Association Young Presidents Organization, and the University of Illinois, as well as governmental groups from the Federal Executive Institute, the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Agency for International Development, NOAA, the Department of Treasury, and NASA. Roger holds a PhD in communications and a Master of Science degree in creativity studies from the State University of New York. When he's not traveling, he lives in Buffalo, New York, and regularly drives a tractor, although he claims not very well, on his family farm near Greeley, Colorado. Please help me welcome Dr. Roger Firestien.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. That's good. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. I've had a chance to take a look at some of the things that you've done, and I must say, I teach at a place called the International Center for Studies in Creativity, and we don't have competitions like you folks have here. So keep it up, continue to do more of it, and I hope you enjoy the process of what you're doing. What we're going to take a look at this afternoon very briefly is I'm going to give you some methods, some tools to help you to continue this creative process. So let's start to the slides, all right? As Mike mentioned, when I'm not traveling, I live in Buffalo, New York, and I really like Buffalo, New York, and I take pictures of Buffalo, New York, and this is a picture of what Buffalo, New York looks like this time of year. Yeah, and there goes the credibility, all right? All right, in our time together, we're going to take a look at 4 things. This is our agenda. We're going to take a look at what prevents us from being creative, because as you're moving along, I'm sure there's some things that got in the way. We're going to take a look at how to deliberately generate ideas. Yes, you can turn your creativity on at will. You can create more ideas than what you ever thought possible. We're going to take a look then at how to evaluate and to critique your ideas so that we can build the idea and the person in the process. And then finally, we're going to take a look at the mindset for innovation, how to build what you're doing and make it even more effective. But let's take a look at first at some of the things that prevent us from being more creative. And one of those things is habits. I'm going to say a word, and I'd like you to say the first word that comes to mind. Are you ready? Okay, this is yes, this is no, this is I'm unconscious. Yes, okay. All right, the word is salt. Very good, nicely done. A little anemic, but not bad, all right? How about this one? Table. We'll get chair or cloth on that, good, all right? How about this one? Day. Night, superb. I think that slide. What do you think? All right. I'd like you to put your knives and forks down for just a second, please. And I'd like you to just clasp your hands in front of you. And would you notice which thumb is on the top? Which one? Right? Left, good, we have controversy. Excellent, great, all right. Now would you completely unclasp your hands? And now would you reclasp them this time with the opposite thumb on the top? How you doing with that? That doesn't feel really good, kind of oogie, isn't it? All right, okay. Well, let's just try this. Just cross your arms in front of you. Just settling in the afternoon, having a nice lunch, right? Would you notice which arm is on the top? Which one? Right? Left, good, controversy again, great, good. Now would you completely uncross your arms? And now would you recross them this time with the opposite arm on the top? We used to do a lot of work in Washington, D.C. There's people walking around the government right now that look just like this guy, okay? All right, well, let's see. We've taken a look at your word association. We've taken a look at your motor coordination. Let's take a look at your addition this afternoon, all right? Now, don't worry, we're going to do this all together, all right? I'm going to put some numbers up here on the screen, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to sum those numbers together in unison out loud, okay? Are you ready? So here's the first number. Okay, that's pretty good, but come on, everybody together, come on. Okay, come on, now with some spirit, come on. Okay, come on, Bisons, I want to hear you, come on. Excellent. Add this number to it, please. Excellent job. Great. Terrific. Thank you. There's another number you might want to consider. Happens to be the right one. All right. I heard 5,000, right? Okay. You all said 5,000, right? But would you agree that this is the correct solution to the problem? Let's get that back up there on the screen. All right? Yes, no, let's work it out together, all right? Okay. Last known piece of data that we all agreed on was 4,090, right? You add 10 to 4,090, you get 4,100, not 5,000, all right? Okay, so what did I do to you? I tricked you, yes. What else did I do? I set you up. I set you up into a pattern. You expected to increase by 1,000 each time, and when that novel piece of data came in, that 10, you made it fit the pattern, all right? Now, I'm not going to tell on you folks, but I will tell on a few other folks. Heads of consumer products groups all say 5,000. Automobile manufacturers in Detroit all say 5,000. Deans of colleges and universities argue whether it's 6,000 or 7,000, right? And then they debate the philosophy behind that, all right? There's only one group of people that this doesn't work on. Who do you think it is? Kids, absolutely right. Okay, the fourth graders, the 1, carry the 5, 4,119, right? They haven't developed, one, the habits that allow us to be very, very efficient, and also the habits that allow us to fall into traps sometimes. And one of the habits that many of us have is to take the first idea we come up with and run with it, even if we run right off the edge of a cliff sometimes, because having a problem is so uncomfortable for us. And what we've been taught as good students, as good employees, as good managers, as good supervisors, and in many cases as good leaders, is, the first answer to solving the problem is usually the best one. Or the quicker you get that answer, the smarter you are. But I'd like you to consider the possibility that sometimes it might make a lot of sense to come up with a number of answers for solving a problem, then you can pick the best answer. I'd also like you to consider the possibility that sometimes the problem that you're presented with isn't the problem at all, and it might make a lot of sense to redefine that problem. So, how do you deal with a habit that's not too effective for you? How do you deal with a habit that's not working for you? Well, my psychologist friends say that the best way to deal with a habit that's not working for you is to replace it with a habit that is working for you. So next time you have a tough problem to solve, I'd like you to consider, if you would, some creativity habits. Ask yourself, how else can I do this? Ask yourself, what if? Ask yourself, how can I use something that doesn't fit with this at all? And the bottom one down there, how can I use something that doesn't fit with this at all, is really the essence of creativity, which is bringing together different ideas and different concepts from an entirely different perspective in a new way to create a new idea. So why use creativity habits in the first place? Well, as the philosopher Socrates was once paraphrased as saying, when you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. Now let me just run that by again, all right? When you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. Now, if you like what you're getting, that's terrific. But if you want to make some changes in how you're working together, if you want to make some changes in how you're innovating, if you want to make some changes in how you're teaching, that might be some reasons to consider some creativity habits. Oh, and by the way, if that one doesn't work for you, I'd like you to try this one on for size. The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. Now, sometimes a picture really works much better than just words, and so let's take a look at this. I don't know if you can see this or not, but on the left side, there's a car in the water, all right? And there's a crane trying to get the car out, okay? And so here we go, the crane's getting the car out, and crane's getting the car out. Do you hear music in the background, some strange, foreboding music? Oh. So what do? Get a bigger crane, absolutely. Okay, good, there we go, okay, all right. Uh-huh. Yep. Okay. Uh-huh. Yep. Mm-hmm. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Okay. So there's some things that get in the way of our creativity, okay? Some habits, all right? The next thing we're going to take a look at is how to deliberately generate lots of ideas, because you can actually turn on your creativity at will. We have tools, we have methods, we have processes to make this happen. And so the main thing that follows that this is built on are some guidelines for generating ideas. Now, the first guideline for generating ideas is defer judgment, no criticism. Second guideline is to strive for quantity. Third guideline is to seek wild and unusual ideas. And the fourth guideline is to combine and build on other ideas. Let's talk about each one of those. Now, deferring judgment is probably the most important guideline to keep in mind when you're generating ideas. But what deferring judgment asks you to do is to unlearn some of the usual ways that you've been taught to think about an idea. Because from a very early age, we've been taught that as soon as you thought of an idea, you immediately needed to judge whether it's right or wrong or good or bad or safe or unsafe. But in generating new ideas or new ways for solving problems, you need to hold off your judgment for a time until we come up with a number of ideas to choose from. And what we've been often taught is as an idea is an action. Ideas are not actions. They're potential actions you might take later on in the process, but at the beginning of the creative process, all we're looking to do is to store up some ideas. We'll evaluate those ideas later on in the process. Now, oftentimes when we think about judgment, we think about verbal judgment. But there's a lot of other stuff that's going on when you're working in groups, and I'm sure you folks experience this when you're coming up with ideas. There's also nonverbal judgment as well. And a number of years ago, the communication researcher Dr. Albert Morabian found that over 90% of both our positive and our negative meaning is conveyed by our tone of voice and our body expressions and gestures. Over 90% of our meaning is conveyed by tone of voice and body expressions and gestures. Now that seems to be a pretty high figure for me. So I'd like you to just do this. Would you all just make a fist, please? Up here like this. Good. Everybody with me? Everybody watching? You're great. Now, would you put your hand on your chin, please? Very good. Nice job, okay? This is your chin. Somebody's like, oh, maybe he didn't see me. Okay, so the takeaway from that is, folks, when you're generating ideas, don't only pay attention to your verbals, oh, that's not going to work, okay, but also to your nonverbals as well. Great idea, huh? Okay. All right, let's take a look. Here's a quote you might want to consider. Nothing is more dangerous than a new idea when it's the only one you have. Which leads us to the next guideline, which is to strive for quantity. Now, people ask me, how many ideas do I have to come up with to get a good one? Do I have to come up with hundreds and hundreds of ideas to get a breakthrough? And the answer to that question is it depends on the kinds of ideas that you're looking for. Now, it's not uncommon when we do new product or new strategy sessions to come up with 200 or 300 or 400 ideas. But most of the time, we don't need that many ideas. And that's why we found it helpful to set an idea quota or an idea goal. Now, when we set the idea quota at about 50 ideas and had a well-defined problem, and then when we analyzed the ideas that came out, here's what we found. We found the first 10 to 12 ideas tended to be the usual ideas. These are the ideas that people had thought of before. Now, the next third, about 15 to 30 or so, tended to be the more unusual ideas. People got a little crazier, a little goofier. They loosened up a little bit more. Now, those unusual ideas were important because they helped to form the more unusual idea combinations that occurred later on in the process. And incidentally, if you hit your idea quota, let yourself go. You'll be real pleased with the ideas that you get after that quota. But the key learning from this data is this. If you're sitting around generating 10 or 12 ideas for solving a problem, you think you're getting real creative, you're not. All you're doing is getting those ideas out that are already rumbling around in people's heads. The creativity comes in the stretch. The innovation comes in the stretch. Okay, next guideline is to seek wild and unusual ideas. Alex Osborne, the inventor of brainstorming, said it's much easier to tame down a wild idea than it is to invigorate a weak one. We like to use the analogy that it's much easier to tame a tiger than it is to make a pussycat wild. So when you're generating those ideas, go for the wild ideas first. You can always engineer them down later. It's much easier to engineer down an idea than to think a new one up. And the final guideline for generating ideas is deliberately try to combine and improve and build on other ideas. Let one idea spur another idea and spur another idea. And here's a powerful example of building on other ideas. First portable computer. First Apple. TRS-80, dual disk drive. Yeah. First portable, 35 pounds, dual disk drive. I need to put my iPhone on there. Okay. Stephen King, the prolific author, wrote a book a number of years ago about the process of writing. The book is called On Writing, and I encourage you to pick it up because what he does in the first part, he talks about his process of writing, and in the second half, you get to see how his editors deal with his work. And I love what Stephen King has to say about the creative process. He says, let's get one thing clear right now, shall we? There is no idea dump, no story central, no island of the buried bestsellers. Good story ideas seem to come quite literally out of nowhere. Two previously unrelated ideas come together and make something new under the sun. And that's really the essence of creativity. Taking something over here, making a connection with something over here that doesn't seem to relate, bringing it together in a new way, and in that idea combination, that's where you get the new insights. That's where you get the new ideas. Okay, so now that you've got some ideas, how do you evaluate those ideas? We've got a whole bunch of ideas out there. How do we evaluate those ideas? How do you build those ideas? Well, let's take a look at that. This word is comments. And when you teach at a place like the International Center for Studies in Creativity, when you do a lot of work in the innovation field, sometimes you have people coming to you with new ideas. And I have a new idea I'd like to show you, and I'd like to just get your comments on that idea, so you're going to need to yell them out to me, all right? And so this is my idea for a new wheelbarrow. I've got a big hopper up there in the front, there's a handle back there in the back, there's a wheel back there in the back. What are your comments on that design? Just yell them out to me. What do we got? What's that? Hard to use. Great, thank you. Good. Other comments? Needs a longer handle. It's impractical. Good. Other comments? Wheels in the wrong place. Absolutely good. Other comments? Can't hear. Yell them out.
Front heavy.
It's definitely front heavy. Good. Yes. Other comments? Unstable. It's unstable. Absolutely good. Other comments? Okay, good. Other comments? What's it for? Great. Okay. Folks, let's get this slide, please. Folks, what's this word? Comments, yes. What did I ask you for? What did I ask you for? Comments, yeah. And what did I get? Yeah, clearly I got 6 criticisms, 1 question, and 1 plus was great idea, all right? Thank you, all right. By the way, this wheelbarrow really does work. It really does exist. It's used primarily for high-rise construction over in Europe and England. The way you operate this wheelbarrow is you pull it up the side of a building on a crane, and instead of pulling up on it like a regular wheelbarrow, you push down on it. Now, by pushing down on it, you get a much sharper turning radius, a much tighter control of the wheelbarrow. Now, that's pretty important if you're on about 38 floors above the ground, you're on a girder about this wide, and the safety net's about 10 floors below you. You want to have some control over that design. But I think there's a much more important process going on this afternoon than just an unusual-looking wheelbarrow that, granted, I didn't give you a lot of information on. What would have happened if I would have taken your comments and if I would have modified my wheelbarrow design according to your comments? What would I have? The same old traditional wheelbarrow, right? And folks, that's what new ideas look like sometimes. They look a little strange, they look a little weird, they look a little odd. Sometimes we don't have all the information out there about what the idea is, and the knee-jerk reaction to innovation is kill it. So how do we deal with the fact that for most groups and for most audiences, one has to do something pretty neutral like comment on a design? Clearly, most of the time, most of the comments we get are criticisms. Well, we've got a concept and we've got a tool for that. The concept's called affirmative judgment, and the tool is called pluses and potentials and concerns, or PPC for short. Now, when you look at this technique, pluses and potentials and concerns, what do you notice about it? What do you notice? Positives are first. Yeah, you got a couple positives. What else are you noticing? There's really no no. Okay, so let's take a look at it. You got the positives up first. You have some potentials, and then no idea is perfect, so what are the concerns, the limitations, the minuses of that idea? So let's talk about where this thing came from. And this pluses, potential, concerns technique, its original version came from observing a very successful corporate president of a very successful and innovative firm back in the late 1970s. And so here's how it works. So what they did when they observed this president, they watched him as he conducted meetings. They watched him when people came to him with ideas. And when someone came to him with an idea, he resisted the temptation to destroy that idea. And first he'd take a look at the strengths of that idea. Because in that corporate president's mind, when that person came to him with that idea had the possibility of making the company more money, saving the company more money, or making the company a better place to work. So first he'd talk about the pluses of the idea. What was good about it? They'd sort of blue sky it a little bit, look at the potential in the idea. What might be the result if the idea were implemented? And then he'd deal with the concerns. But he'd deal with the concerns in a very unique way. Instead of saying things like, well, that's going to cost too much, he'd ask a question. He'd say, well, how might you reduce the cost? Or instead of saying things like, well, management's never going to buy that idea, he'd ask a question. He'd say, well, how might you convince management of the value of your idea? So let's say that you've gone into this corporate president with this wheelbarrow design, and he's using this pluses and potentials and concerns technique, and he might say something like this. He might say something like, we know what I like about that idea is the hopper looks pretty big, probably hold a lot. Handle's short, will save a lot of money on handle material. Design looks pretty simple, it'll probably be pretty easy to manufacture. You know, some potential I see in that design is maybe we put that wheel in the back there, maybe there's going to be a different center of gravity here. Maybe people with less strength can operate this thing. And you know, I haven't quite seen a wheelbarrow design quite like that before, so maybe if we could build this, we could get out to the market first, have first to market advantage, and make a lot of money before our competition ever caught on to what we're doing. Got a couple concerns. Looks like it's a little out of balance. So how might you pre-test this design? And frankly, our wheelbarrow department is a little over budget right now, so how might you find the money to develop this idea? Now put yourself in the person's place that proposed that idea. What's an evaluation like that going to do for you? What's it going to do? Encourage you, motivate you. Good. What else might it do? Provide direction. Yeah, now let's play the scenario out just a little bit further. Let's say that you go to work on this design and you find indeed that this isn't a very good wheelbarrow design after all, but a modification of this design might be more appropriate. What do you think your chances are now of going back to the corporate president with a modified wheelbarrow design after something like a pluses and potentials and concerns type of evaluation? What are your chances? Good, and that's exactly what they found. Folks, techniques like pluses and potentials and concerns, or the whole idea of affirmative judgment, are designed to do a number of things. First, pluses and potentials and concerns is a critical thinking tool. There's a difference between criticism and critical thinking. Criticism takes a look at what's wrong with the idea and stays there. Critical thinking takes a look at the strengths of the idea, the potential in the idea, and then creates an opening to overcome the concerns about that idea. It's also an opportunity to give an idea a fair hearing. Oh, and one more thing. Affirmative judgment and the whole idea of pluses and potentials and concerns is also designed to help you to stop thinking like a reptile and start thinking like a human being. Right? Now let me tell you where that comes from. Your brain is made in three parts. You've got a brainstem, a limbic system, and a neocortex. All that a reptile has is a brainstem. The way a reptile reacts to innovation in its environment is it either eats it, it attacks it, it runs from it, it tries to mate with it, or it doesn't see it at all. Right? Folks, this is the reptilian response to new ideas. Right? What pluses and potentials and concerns ask you to do is to take a look at that big, huge brain you have here, to take a look at not only what's bad about the idea, but to take a look at the strengths of the idea, the potential in the idea, and then create an opening to overcome the concerns or the downsides about that idea. So we have a saying around our company. The saying is, don't be a crocodile. And on your table there, you have some crocodile cards. So if they're right out there in the middle, and on the front, we have the guidelines for generating ideas, and on the back side, we have the pluses, potentials, and concerns technique. Please pass them around and take one. So, let's take a look at this whole idea about looking at ideas. I'd like you to do this. Would you all stand up, please? Okay. Would you get a partner? Okay. And would you face that partner, please? And if we have odd number, we can have an observer, something like that. Anybody else need it? All right. Decide who's going to be person A and who's going to be person B. Okay, good. All right, person A, would you do this? Make a fist, not a salute, not a fist, okay? And then person B, would you put your hand against that, okay? You got that? Okay, everybody ready? Say with this. Okay, so here's the deal. Person A, push. Okay, you can sit down. So, what did I ask person A to do? Push. What did I ask person B to do? Nothing. What did you do? See, what we're doing here with this pluses and potentials and concerns technique, we're having to override a lot of the stuff that we've been trained. I mean, that was your reptile brain going on there. She's going to push against me, I'm going to push against her. All right? So let's take it a little bit further. All right? Let's try this out. I've got another design I'd like to show you, and I'd like you to try pluses and potentials and concerns on this design. And this is my design for a new jet, okay? And it's got a propeller back there in the back, and it has a jet engine there, and it's got a wing there, and the wings are actually swept forward. It has a pointy thing out front, that's the technical name for that, okay? And a colorful stripe, okay? So let's take a look at this. What are the pluses of this design? What are the pluses? It's got wings. Thank you very much, Dr. Stam. Good. Other pluses? Nice red stripe. Good. Other pluses? Aerodynamic. Okay, good. What potential do you see in this design? What might be the result if we were to build it? It might, what's that? It might, okay, so other potentials. Okay, it might be heavy in the front. We'll get to that in just a second. What might be the result if we were to build it? Other potentials. Might be able to fly backwards. Thank you. Good. Okay, good. Just park it over there. Good. Back it up behind a cloud. Good, good. Other potential. Might be more energy efficient, okay? Now, what concerns do you have about this design?
How does having a propeller and a jet engine benefit?
So how does having a propeller and jet engine benefit? Good. Any other concerns? What's that? Yeah, so how to make sure that you have, the tail doesn't drag. Yeah, good. Any other concerns? Yeah, how to make sure that the jet engine doesn't destroy the propeller. Yeah. By the way, anybody think it's going to fly? Because it does. All right. It's a Learfan 2100 prototype executive aircraft that's constructed of graphite composite materials that are stronger than aluminum but weigh half as much as aluminum. Now, the Learfan led the way for innovative design and construction of corporate aircraft. By the way, this plane first flew in January of 1981. It's been around a long time. Unfortunately, because of management problems at Learfan, this plane never did make it to commercial production, but this plane, the Big Beach Starship, did go into production in 1989. It's an all-composite turboprop. It's the first of its kind ever certified, and thanks to advanced design, the Starship can reach speeds of 395 miles per hour, uses 1/3 less fuel than a business jet, and it can easily use short runways. Now, this is not a lesson in airplane design, but I do think they're kind of cool, all right? But what this is a lesson is in the development of an evolution of ideas. Now, the Learfan wasn't really very successful. It didn't make it to production. The Beach Starship was marginally successful. But the Beach Starship happens to be a Burt Rutan design. Burt Rutan's been in the news lately because he won the X Prize a number of years ago when he took a craft right up to the edge of space and brought it back to Earth. Here's how it works. The big craft there is White Knight. The craft underneath is Spaceship One. The way it works is the plane takes off, goes to 42,000 feet. Spaceship One unhooks, goes right to the edge of space. Now, this works. But the graphite carbon composite materials that make this up are now most of the components in modern aircraft. Okay? And what those components have done is they've made aircraft safer, they've made it much more efficient, they've made it much more reliable. So what didn't work in one particular area may work in another area. And so you folks that are inventors today, what might not work in a particular area, think about how can I apply it in another area? Or how can I use this in another area? Or what other applications might this be worth for? Okay, there's Spaceship One. So let's take a look finally at the mindset for innovation. The mindset for innovation is failure equals learning. Failure equals learning. And we're going to go back to our friend Burt Rutan here. I love what Burt Rutan has to say about failure. He says, I've got to develop 9 prototypes that go nowhere to make one that goes to production for big money. Only the place that tolerates failure gives rise to the thinking that results in success. And another expert on failure happens to be a gentleman named Dr. Wilson Greatbatch. Anybody know who Wilson Greatbatch is? Anybody know what a pacemaker is? Yeah, he invented it. As a matter of fact, Dr. Greatbatch lived about 10 miles from my house. The last time I met with Dr. Greatbatch, not only did Greatbatch invent the pacemaker, but he also invented the battery that powered the pacemaker. And as I said, the last time I met with Dr. Greatbatch, he had about 890 patents to his name. Now, here's what Greatbatch has to say about failure. He says, I look forward to failure as a learning experience. 9 out of 10 things that I work on fail, but the one that works pays for the other 9. So you've heard that expression, trial and error. Well, I want you to change that expression from trial and error to trial and learn. Because whenever we do something, you create a result. It might not be the result that you anticipated, but the question is, what can you learn from that result? Trial and error to trial and learn. Okay, we're about to close. But before we close, just one more thing. We've spent about 30 minutes together this afternoon, and I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to take at least one thing from what you learned in the last 30 minutes and use it in the next 24 hours. So when somebody comes up to you with a new idea, instead of saying, well, that's not going to work, try pluses and potentials or concerns. Or if you're in a meeting and you need to come up with some ideas, don't just come up with 1 or 2, come up with 15 or 20, and then evaluate later. Or if you're working on a project and you're feeling uncomfortable because you've had a failure, take what you perceive as a failure. Take a look at what the result was and see what you can learn from that result. Okay. Dr. Stamp and I were just talking about this, and I want to close with a piece by a gentleman named Dr. E. Paul Torrance. Paul Torrance is probably one of the eminent creativity researchers. He began his work as early as World War II, when he investigated the communication behaviors in bomber cockpit flight crews. But he didn't spend his time there. He spent most of his time in creativity in education and creativity in children. He developed the Torrance tests of creative thinking, the tests that bear his name, the tests that determine whether programs like Dr. Stamp and I work on work or not. Right? But the landmark work that Torrance did was the largest and the longest longitudinal study of creativity in people ever conducted. And in this study, he identified children in the 3rd or 4th grade that were somehow labeled as gifted or creative or talented or special in some way, and he followed them for 20 years. He interviewed them, he interviewed their teachers, gave them all sorts of psychological instruments, interviewed their parents. Some of them were very, very successful, some of them weren't. Some of them knew exactly what they wanted to do in the 3rd and 4th grade, and they followed through on their visions of the future. And some of them changed their visions of the future every other month. Torrance wrote 3 books on the subject, had hundreds of professional articles, had rooms and rooms of data from this study. But I think the real brilliance of what Paul Torrance was able to do was to condense his findings into an 8-line manifesto. He calls it the Manifesto for Children. I like to call it the Manifesto for Creativity. I'd like to just read it to you in closing. These essentially are the findings of Torrance's 20-year study. Don't be afraid to fall in love with something and pursue it with intensity. Know, understand, take pride in. Practice, develop, exploit your greatest strengths. Learn to free yourself from the expectations of others and to walk away from the games they impose on you. Free yourself to play your own game. Find a great teacher or mentor who will help you. Learn the skills of interdependence. Don't waste energy trying to be well-rounded. Do what you love and can do well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that was pretty awesome, huh? Congratulations. Thanks for coming. We'll see you in a year.